Think back 10 years. 10 years can be a long time, and it can pass in the blink of an eye. The year was 2007, and a novel titled Sukoyang was published, and it became an instant sensation. This was the first book from a small press in Western Canada that went on to be longlisted for the Giller Prize, shortlisted for the Governor-General's Literary Award for Fiction, for the 2008 Commonwealth Prize, British Columbia's Ethel Wilson Fiction Prize, the City of Toronto Book Award, the Vancouver Public Library's One Book, One Vancouver, the Relit for Best Book from an independent Canadian press that year, and as well the 2000 Amazon Books in Canada First Novel Award. Not bad. Of course, I'm talking about David Chariandy. David has an MA from Carleton right here in Ottawa and a PhD from York University, and he teaches in the Department of English at Simon Fraser in Vancouver, where he's raising a family. This year, 2017, has seen the long-awaited publication of a second novel, Brother, with McClelland and Stewart. Please welcome to the stage David Chariandy.
Thank you, Peter, for that very warm and generous introduction. It's such a great honor to be here. As Peter mentioned, I did my MA here at Carleton University in Ottawa, of course. Also did my BA here. So I lived here for 6 years, and this has really been the first time I've returned since school. And I was walking around Bronson. I visited Carleton. It's nice to be in this space again, and I'm very honored to be here. I'll read briefly from the first chapter of the novel, beginning with the prologue. Once, he showed me his place in the sky. That hydro pole in a parking lot all weed broke and abandoned. Looking up, you'd see the dangers of the climb. The feeder lines on insulators, the wired bucket called a pole pig, the footholes rusted bad and going way into a sky cut hard by live cables. You'd hear the electricity as you moved higher, he warned me. Feel it shivering your teeth and lighting a whole city of fear inside your head. But if you made it to the top, he said, you were good. All that free air and seeing. The streets below, suddenly patterns you could read. A great lookout, my brother told me. One of the best in the neighborhood. But step badly on a line, touch your hand to the wrong metal part while you're brushing up against another, and you'd burn. Hang scarecrow stiff and smoking in the air, dead black sight for all. You want to go out like that? He asked. So when you climbed, he said, you had to go careful. You had to watch your older brother and follow close his moves. You had to think back on every step before you took it, remembering hard the whole way up. He taught me that, my older brother. Memories got nothing to do with the old and the gray and the faraway gone. Memories the muscle sting of now. A kid reaching brave in the skull hum of power. And if you can't memory right, he said, you lose. So my novel is about two brothers growing up in a tough suburb. It's named Scarborough. Scarberia, Scarlum. I mean, there's many ways of describing Scarborough. I guess next passage, just the short passage that I'll conclude with, not quite as short as the last one, so get your money's worth, I hope. The two brothers are still quite young. The speaker is named Michael, and the older brother is Francis. Francis had nightmares. He'd be lying in the bunk above me, and I'd listen to his breathing, the soft wheeze he might have from allergies or a cold. He'd be on the edge of sleep when some terror would visit him. He'd wake screaming a deep body scream, all cracked throat and emptied stomach, and it would take me a while to realize that I'd been screaming too. If Mother was home, she'd offer comfort. She'd lie beside us, and with the warmth of her body, push back the fear. We'd lie quiet and awake, the three of us, for a long time, watching the wind blow ghosts into the drapes, and the cars passing by on the avenue cast moving lights upon the walls and ceiling. Never speaking, listening for things. What scares two boys aged 10 and 11? Sometimes in the midst of our play, a siren would cut the air, and cars with flashing lights would brake, screeching on the avenue. A neighborhood kid soon cuffed on the sidewalk, his face turned away from us in shame. There were tales about boys jumped and beaten, faces ruined, jaws wired shut. I saw it myself, claimed one. I did it, claimed another, and we were never sure if either ought to be believed. Always there were stories on TV and in the papers of gangs, killings in bad neighborhoods, predators roaming close. One morning, I peered with Francis into a newspaper box to read a headline about the latest terror, and caught in the glass the reflection of our own faces. From the age of 7, Francis could read. He read books, of course, regularly and well into his teens, but he could also read the many signs and gestures around us. He could read the faces of the neighborhood youth hanging around outside the 7-Eleven and know when to offer a nod, or else a sly joke, or else just to keep moving and not just then attempt to meet a pair of bruised eyes. But especially, Francis could read our mother. He recognized her pride, but also the roots and tolls of her labors. He knew that for work as a cleaner, and sometimes a nanny, she had not only tough hours, but also long journeys, complicated rides along bus routes to faraway office buildings and malls and homes, long waits at odd hours at stops and stations, sometimes in the rain or in the thick heat of the afternoon, sometimes in the cold and dark of winter. He understood that there is a specific moment during the trip back home from work when a mother's body threatens to give out, a specific site in the bus loop at Kennedy Station when exhaustion closes in and the limbs feel like meat, and it takes every last strength from a mother to make the 2 additional bus transfers home. When Francis was not yet quite a teen and Mother returned home in a state, he would go to work. He would casually offer her a cool, damp cloth for her head, maybe even a pan of water and Epsom salts for her feet. He would fetch a blanket in winter, or a fan and a glass of water in summer. He was careful never to overdo his concern, and so wound her pride, or otherwise to break any of the household rules she had established to help us through lean times. But one hot summer day, when Mother collapsed on the couch, shaking her head at all offered food, unwilling to take a sip of water or even to open her eyes, 12-year-old Francis dared big. He went to the kitchen and took from the freezer a can of orange juice concentrate. We had been warned repeatedly by Mother never to touch such stuff without her permission, and if she allowed us to touch it, we were to use 5 cans of water to dilute the concentrate, never 3 as the fool instructions on the can said. But on that day, Francis used just 1 can of water, mashing it into a frozen lump of concentrate with a wooden spoon and pouring the slush bright into a glass. He gently lowered the glass into Mother's curled fingers, her eyes still closed. I braced for all hell to break loose as she tasted, her mouth moving as if eating pudding. I made it sweet this time, explained Frances. Sweet, Mother said, a tired smile. She touched his face. She cupped his chin and touched the growing shadow of his mustache. She pinched his earlobe tightly between her thumb and fingers, as if it were a raindrop from a leaf, and then reached to gently pluck something from his hair, a burr from the Rouge Valley. Thank you.
David, can you perhaps lead off by speaking of the family unit that's at the core and some of the mysteries of the people who are intimately living together who may or may not know everything about one another?
Well, I think that's a beautiful question. The idea that people to whom we're closest are the most mysterious, and that there are mysteries to discover about these people whom we might at times think we know everything about, maybe too much about. In my novel, it's a relationship between two brothers that I'm exploring, and also a relationship between the brothers and their mother. And because of, of the sense of vulnerability all of them feel for different reasons, they stick together, and they each of them don't want to admit, both to the world or to their loved ones, that they're feeling afraid, that they're feeling vulnerable, that they're not sure what the future holds for any of them. And so, in that absence of talk between them, they learn to read when others are feeling those things. They learn to read the fear, the vulnerability from those unspoken gestures. And I think there's something beautiful about that. I mean, that's how I plumb that mystery, I guess. The mystery of reading people beyond what they're actually saying, and exploring that intimacy between family members.